customer, shoots and a man who was robbing a restaurant.
January 5th, 2023, this anonymous guy was having dinner at El Ranchito Taquiera on South Gessner Road in southwest Houston when a robber walks in with a gun. Little did the robber know, though, he'd met his match that day because he didn't walk out alive. We got some victims on camera getting their revenge.
Surveillance footage from inside the house shows armed men running rampant. About a minute later, a woman holding a gun comes out from the back room.
没有选择的，我就拿了我枪抢在那边的枪出来。
It's September 16th, 2016 at around 3:45 a.m. 40-year-old Chen Fengzhu, this Asian businesswoman in the restaurant and seafood industry, would find herself face-to-face with three armed intruders inside her house in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Chen had been staying at the Gwinnett County residence for convenience related to her work, along with her employee, Ruben Maya. Both were in separate rooms when this break-in occurred. The attackers were later identified as Antonio Leaks, 28, from Atlanta, and two unidentified black males believed to be between 20 and 30 years old, approximately 6 feet tall. All three suspects were armed with handguns. Surveillance video from the residence clearly captures their entry and actions. The three men enter through the front door without masks, displaying a boldness that signaled prior criminal behavior, or maybe not. Now, details on their criminal history do remain limited. Police refer to them as armed and dangerous, and noted that their readiness to shoot suggested prior violent offenses. So as this began, Leaks and his accomplices storm the home, surprising Maya first. One of the men points a gun at him and demands money. Maya later recalled that he tried to make as much noise as possible, hoping to alert Fengzhu. His plan worked. Fengzhu woke up. She grabs her gun, attempts to call 911. When the call failed to go through, she exited her room, still wearing her pajamas, holding both her pistol and phone. Fengzhu encountered these armed men in the hallway as they're busy searching around a room full of cardboard boxes for any valuables. Surveillance shows her firing multiple rounds at the intruders, who immediately turned and attempted to flee. One suspect runs out the front door. Another, the man in the hoodie, darted across the hallway, pointing his gun at Fengzhu as he passed, before smashing through the back glass door to escape. During the exchange, Fengzhu shot Leaks in the torso. He collapses in the driveway and dies at the scene, despite officers attempting CPR for over 15 minutes. One of these suspects did return fire during the chaos. Fortunately, neither Fengzhu nor Maya were injured. After the shooting, Fengzhu and Maya checked the house together, turning on the lights and ensuring the other was unharmed. Maya takes the gun from Fengzhu and finds out that she fired every bullet. It's at this time she eventually gets through to 911.
Where are they now? They run because I got a gun.
Gwinnett County PD responded quickly. They transported Fengzhu and Maya to headquarters for questioning. No charges were filed against Fengzhu as investigators confirmed that she acted in self-defense. Georgia law permits the use of deadly force under the Castle Doctrine and stand your ground provisions when facing a forcible felony, such as an armed robbery. Not long after, the police released the surveillance videos and still images of the other two suspects in hopes the public could identify them. The images clearly showed their faces, making no effort to conceal their identity. The boldness of the crime, especially the decision to break into a home without masks, was described by police as unusual and dangerous. Authorities also believe the suspects had fled in a vehicle. March 29, 2018, 18 months after the break-in, one of the fleeing men was arrested and identified as Bernard Eugene Little, a 35-year-old from Atlanta. They booked him into the Gwinnett County Jail and charged him with felony murder and armed robbery. In Georgia, under their felony murder rule, an accomplice can be charged with murder if someone dies during the commission of a felony, even if the accomplice didn't directly cause the death. The third suspect, seen in surveillance wearing a baseball cap, remained at large. Police continue to urge anyone with information to contact them or Crime Stoppers, emphasizing the ongoing threat the suspect posed to the community. Following the event, Chen Fengzhu recounted the incident in this interview with CCTV Plus.
没有选择了，我就拿了我枪抢在那边的枪出来，叭一下我就出来了，看到这陌生人，我就砰一声。
She described how she attempted to call 911 before resorting to her firearm.
当时没有想到害怕，但只是想到怎么去应付。
Quick action, she explained, was guided by instinct and a sense of revenge against these intruders, rather than fear. Shortly after the incident, Chen Fengzhu returned to her business, though the traumatic event undoubtedly left lasting effects. It's April 13th, 2013. Lauren Clark, a 27-year-old hairstylist in Washington, D.C., was jogging through her neighborhood in Glover Park when she was violently attacked. Now, the case was taken to court and a sentence was handed out, but Clark felt dissatisfied with that judgment and set out to get her own revenge. Clark, slender, 5'5", a woman with passion for hairdressing, had grown up in rural Illinois, and at the time of the attack, she worked at Immortal Beloved, a popular salon on 14th Street. On April 10, 2013, after finishing her shift around 8 p.m., she changes into her leggings and a tank top to go out for a run. Running would be her affordable workout, seeing it as a therapeutic escape after a long day with clients. And at around 11:45 p.m., near 37th Street Northwest and Tunlaw Road, a man grabs her from behind, shoves his hands between her legs, covers her mouth, and slammed her to the sidewalk. Clark fights back, flipping onto her back and clawing at his face, dislodging his glasses. The attacker punched her, stole her phone, and fled. The assailant, Jairo A. Cruz, was a 24-year-old chef rising in D.C.'s restaurant scene. Now, Cruz lost his father to alcoholism at the age of 12, an event his defense later said left him emotionally withdrawn. After Cruz fled, Clark chased him briefly before flagging down a Metro police officer. She identified him at the scene, and Detective Yvette Maupin swabbed her hands for DNA, noting the scratches on Cruz's face as strong evidence. Police then arrest him minutes after this assault, as he was walking alone on 37th Street with fresh scratches on his face. Interestingly, though, Cruz confessed to attacking Clark and another woman earlier that night near the Naval Observatory. The other victim was also a 27-year-old woman who was on a motorized scooter when he grabbed her. This other victim, who had screamed and driven off after Cruz grabbed her, called 911 from home. Now, during court proceedings, he admitted to assaulting 4 other women in D.C., though he was never arrested nor charged for those incidents. He had no prior arrests, but his admission revealed a pattern of targeting women alone at night. In fact, prosecutors said his actions seemed planned and deliberate, like that of a habitual offender. Police classified Clark's attack as third-degree sexual abuse by force and robbery, both felonies, due to the tackle, sexual contact, and punch. However, Assistant U.S. Attorney Sharon Marcus Kern charges Cruz with misdemeanors, abuse for both attacks, assault for the punch, and second-degree theft for the phone. Clark, expecting the felony charges to stand, felt the downgrade was a betrayal. She would also believe the justice system had a clear case but mishandled it. So June 2013, Cruz would sign a plea deal, and prosecutors dropped the theft charge and one sexual abuse charge related to the second woman. Over 4 hearings in fall 2013, Judge Truman Morrison, a veteran D.C. Superior Court judge, sentences Cruz to 10 days in jail and 5 years of probation. Interestingly, Cruz served on his sentence only on his days off, which were on Mondays and Tuesdays. This was done to accommodate his job as a chef. He was also barred from contacting Clark or the other victim, but was not placed on any offender registry, as the misdemeanor charges didn't qualify. Judge Morrison calls this case a serious misdemeanor, but considered Cruz's remorse. The judgment was also influenced by his defense attorney's claim that Cruz's actions were as a result of alcohol abuse, having consumed 20 drinks before those attacks. Clark, delivering a powerful victim impact statement describing the vivid trauma of the assault, was devastated by this lenient sentence. She misses the final hearing, unable to keep missing work, and learns from prosecutor Danny Nguyen that Cruz was working at a restaurant called The Brixton, a place she had visited post-attack. Clark's dissatisfaction with the justice system would grow as she repeatedly encountered Cruz. In October 2013, she sees him outside the Black Cat Bar, just 20 feet away, wearing a plaid flannel shirt. In 2014, a Google search reveals Cruz has been promoted to chef de cuisine at Vidalia, which was just a block from her new West End apartment. Now, fearing for her safety, she obtains a 1-year civil protection order in September 2014, requiring Cruz to stay away from her home and salon. Yet, in October 2014, she sees him pulling into a parking lot near her apartment, making eye contact with her. By 2017, suffering from panic attacks and in therapy now, Clark learned Vidalia had closed. Checking Cruz's Instagram, she discovers now he joined Le Diplomat in late 2016, a restaurant she frequented. Just the thought that Cruz might have prepared her food made her sick. Checking court records, she found that Cruz had been moved to unsupervised probation on April 10, 2017, without her notification, pretty much violating her rights. Under the 2004 Crime Victims' Rights Act, a probation officer admitted Cruz never received the mandated offender evaluation, having been treated like a low-level drug offender instead. So now, feeling abandoned by the system, Clark took action. In the spring of 2017, she writes an anonymous letter to Le Diplomat with help from friend and bar manager Saeed Haddad, detailing Cruz's crimes against her and 5 other women. She urges the restaurant to act, warning of an awareness campaign. June 6, 2017, Clark goes a step further and distributes flyers along 14th Street with Cruz's photo and court case details headlined, "This man has assaulted 6 women in D.C." The flyers spread online, and the Washington City paper publishes a story. This then prompted the other women to come forward with allegations. The first was Emily Schimmel, who dated Cruz in 2016, claiming that he assaulted her while she was intoxicated and unable to consent. Juliana Clark, a former Vidalia worker, also said Cruz manipulated her into a sexual relationship, groped her, and then pressured her for sex in a storage room. And another Vidalia employee would claim similar non-consensual acts. So after all these allegations, Cruz is sacked from his position at Le Diplomat 2 months later. Also in September 2017, Clark's attorney, Kristen Eliasson, secured a new hearing, arguing the lack of notification was legal. Clark would share that her trauma changed her forever and reported that the assault felt like signing up to be re-traumatized. But in the end, Judge Morrison apologized, reinstated supervised probation, and ordered the overdue evaluation. Clark, who has now stopped running after this attack, continues to live with the trauma, but her actions did expose Cruz and empower others to speak out.
Customer shoots and kills a man who was robbing a restaurant.
In 2013, Eric Eugene Washington killed a man and was given 15 years in jail for that. But then when he was released, he was involved in a robbery and seemed to have met his match. January 5th, 2023. At 11:30 p.m., a 46-year-old man sits quietly inside El Ranchito Taquiera on South Gessner Road in southwest Houston. He's dining with a friend when a masked man dressed in black enters the restaurant, holding what appears to be a handgun. Now, the robber points this weapon at the 10 customers in this place, shouting demands, and collects their money and wallets at gunpoint. The anonymous customer in the gray t-shirt is going to later be at the center of a deadly encounter caught entirely on camera. Now, the robber was identified by police as 30-year-old Eric Eugene Washington. His records show that he'd already been in and out of this justice system and was no stranger to intimidating or even threatening others for personal gain. In fact, according to court records, this wasn't Washington's first robbery. 2013, Washington and others are charged with capital murder after a man was killed during an armed robbery, according to prosecutors. The charge was later changed to aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon, and Washington was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Now, it's unclear when exactly Washington was released, but he was arrested again on December 16, 2022, when authorities said he pushed his girlfriend to the ground and scratched her. They charge him with misdemeanor family violence, and he's released on a personal recognizance bond. Despite these repeated run-ins with the law, Washington did not stop his life of crime. So, when he stepped into that taqueria, he continued a cycle of criminal behavior that had already led to consequences in the past. And as surveillance footage later confirmed, Washington would move from table to table, waving his piece and demanding valuables from frightened patrons. Most complied without resistance. The atmosphere is pretty tense, customers visibly panicked and ducking under tables. But as Washington moves past the man in the gray t-shirt who'd already handed over his belongings, the situation turns. With Washington's back turned, the customer draws his firearm and opens fire. 9 shots to be exact. Washington collapses near the front of the restaurant before this unnamed man who shot him gets up, stands over him, and fires one more, point blank. It's at this point that the shooter picks up the gun and realizes it was a toy. Now, this man is visibly angry, having just killed a man holding a plastic gun. He retrieves the stolen money from Washington's lifeless body and calmly returns it to the other victims of this restaurant. He then throws the fake gun against the wall and leaves the scene in an older model pickup truck before police arrive. The entire thing's captured on surveillance and quickly goes viral. When police review the footage and examine the weapon, they confirm that the gun Washington had used wasn't real. It was a plastic BB gun, possibly an airsoft replica. However, under Texas law, the appearance of a weapon and the perceived threat are what matter in determining whether the use of deadly force is justified. According to Section 9.31 and .32 of the Texas Penal Code, a person may use deadly force to protect themselves or others if they reasonably believe it is necessary to prevent harm or the commission of a violent crime. The man who fired the shots did not remain at the scene. He's later located through his attorney, who contacted the Houston PD and the Harris County DA's office. The man gives a full account of the incident and cooperated with the investigation. Now, his lawyer stated that the shooting wasn't something his client took lightly, and he described the emotional burden the man carried from taking a human life, even under the stress of self-defense. Houston police also try to identify and speak with the other customers who were there that had left before they got there. January 2024. After nearly a year of legal scrutiny, a Harris County grand jury reaches a decision. The grand jury declined to indict the shooter. They determined there wasn't enough probable cause to proceed with criminal charges. This ruling officially cleared the man of wrongdoing and aligned with the position held by many legal experts familiar with Texas self-defense laws. Attorney Juan Elgueta Jr., who represented the shooter, stated that the customer had no intention of playing the role of a vigilante. Instead, the man acted in defense of his life and the lives of others in this restaurant. Guetta would explain that the shooter's decision was especially personal because seated across from him during the robbery was his best friend. Restaurant owner Pedro Lopez also publicly supported the grand jury's decision. He calls the shooter a hero and credited him with potentially saving multiple lives that night. Lopez emphasized that if Washington had carried a real gun, the situation could have turned out much worse. He would also express regret that the customer hadn't returned to the restaurant since the incident, likely out of concern for his safety and privacy. However, the shooter's identity will remain protected. And trust us, he continues to live with the emotional consequence of his decision. Though cleared legally, he does express through his attorney that the trauma of taking a life, even in self-defense, would remain with him. This man did not celebrate the outcome. Instead, he asked the media and the public to respect his privacy and acknowledge the seriousness of the entire event.
Not without a fight. A young woman won't back down as a knife-wielding robber goes after her.
I went for it. When I went for it, when I bent down to grab it, he grabbed my hair.
It's September 7th, 2019. 23-year-old Concepcion Escalante was working alone at her family's insurance business, ALE Insurance Services, in Pomona, California, when her day takes a violent turn. Escalante had just finished assisting a customer, a man who entered the business pretty calmly, asking for a quote, and claimed that he needed to retrieve his license from his car. There were no warning signs here. He was polite, smiling, and spoke only Spanish. Nothing about him raised an alarm. But when this man returns about a half an hour later, he's armed with a knife and demands money. The situation escalates quickly. The man tried to take the cash off her desk, but she was not having it. Surveillance would show this man wearing a yellow shirt and jeans, grabbing Escalante by her hair and slamming her against a bookshelf. He then drags her across the hardwood floor in a brutal attempt to intimidate her. But Escalante refused to become just another silent victim. Despite the danger, she fights back, struggling with this man over the knife, eventually punching him in the groin. The fight intensifies on her desk as she tries to grab that weapon from his grip. After the scuffle, the man grabs what money he could, about $900 to $1,000, and flees the scene. Escalante still tried to chase him afterward, unwilling to let him escape without some kind of resistance. In the end, she sustained a cut on her chest, but remained on her feet. The violent confrontation was captured in full by the business surveillance system. The footage would show just how close it came to turning deadly and how Escalante's instincts pushed her to fight back. Following the incident, Pomona police released details about the suspect. He's described as a Latino man around 40 years old, about 5'6", weighing 150 pounds, with brown hair, brown eyes, a mustache, and a preference for jeans and baseball caps or maybe straw hats. Police link him to 3 other armed robberies at local gas stations, where he used the same method, brandishing a knife, demanding cash. The man's pattern of violence suggested a targeted string of offenses, with Escalante's business being his latest stop. Authorities took the footage from Escalante's business as part of their investigation. The video not only captured the assault but also provided clear images of the suspect's appearance, aiding in public awareness and the manhunt. As of the latest reports, though, the robber has not yet been apprehended. Now, before the attack, Escalante thought that she would have simply just handed over the money if ever faced with such a threat. However, in that moment, she knew that she just could not let this man go. It's July 2018. Noor Hayati Jafar's brother, Mohammed Jafar, was assaulted by Mohammed Fazal Omar and his sister, Noor Faratika Omar. Now, they probably thought they got away with it, but they had no idea what Noor Hayati was planning. Noor Hayati Jafar grew up in Singapore with a strong sense of family loyalty. As one of several siblings, she was particularly protective of her younger brother, Mohammed Putera Shafila Jafar. Not much is publicly known about her early life nor background, but by 2018, she's already under a 2-year drug supervision order due to some previous methamphetamine-related offenses. Now, she's required to report for urine tests twice a week, but had failed to do so on dozens of occasions. On the other side, though, we have brother and sister Mohammed and Noor Omar. Both were in their 20s, and there was no indication from court documents that they had previous convictions or criminal records prior to the incident involving Noor Hayati's brother. Now, in early July 2018, the Omar siblings were involved in a violent attack on Noor Hayati's younger brother. The now-deleted video was shared widely on Facebook. It showed Mr. Faisal and several relatives assaulting Mr. Putera while Miss Faratika stood by and watched without intervening. The video would spread quickly, ignite outrage, and set the course for a violent retaliation. On July 7th, 2018, during a Hari Raya celebration at her flat on Spooner Road, Noor Hayati saw the video of her brother being beaten. Furious and deeply affected, she decided that justice had to be delivered personally. So within hours, her plans in motion, she invites the Omar siblings to her flat under the pretense of continuing the Hari Raya festivities and discussing an urgent matter. Oh, she had no intention of talking. Her goal was retribution. Noor Hayati also enlists 2 other people to help execute this plan. Her older brother, Mohammed Bakhtiyar Jafar, agreed to participate. And then there was her friend, Noor Hafina Jamaat, who had seen the video as well and claimed to consider Mr. Putera as family. So Noor Hafina was instructed to boil water before the guests arrive and to record the entire event on a mobile phone. The group finalizes their preparations as midnight approaches. At around 12:30 a.m. on July 8, 2018, Mr. Faisal and Miss Faratika arrive at the flat with 2 friends, and as they step inside, Noor Hayati locked the metal gate behind him. The 2 friends managed to flee almost immediately, but the 2 siblings are now trapped. What followed was a calculated and brutal attack. Noor Hayati grabbed a jug of freshly boiled water and poured it directly onto Faratika's neck, back, and right ear. She then strikes her with that same jug and continues to beat her with a bamboo stick. Bakhtiyar targeted Mr. Faisal, who curled into a fetal position as he was kicked and punched. Miss Faratika eventually managed to escape from the flat, and now with her gone, Noor Hayati turned her full attention to Mr. Faisal. Together, Noor Hayati and Bakhtiyar dragged Mr. Faisal into a corner. Noor Hayati strikes him repeatedly with a bamboo stick, while Bakhtiyar bashes his head twice against a wooden armrest of a chair. It's brutal. At one point, Noor Hayati pours another round of hot water on the left side of his body. He's screaming in pain, leaps up, manages to break free through the back exit. They chased him briefly, with Noor Hanifa still recording the incident. This entire assault lasted about 4 minutes. The injuries were severe. Mr. Faisal had second-degree burns on 4.5% of his body. Miss Faratika also sustained second-degree burns, along with bruises and tenderness on her shoulder and neck. Mr. Faisal didn't seek medical help immediately, but did visit a doctor 5 days later. Court documents later confirmed that the revenge attack video recorded from multiple angles by Noor Hanifa was so graphic, it was never released to the public. Still, pictures of some segments circulate online and draw widespread attention. Authorities had quickly investigated the incident, and by April 2019, police had located and arrested Noor Hayati after observing her acting suspiciously in the Spooner Road area. She was found again to have used amphetamine just days prior. So while out on bail, she's arrested once again on March 12, 2020 for testing positive on the same drug. She admitted that amphetamine had been given to her by a passing acquaintance, and that she had consumed it by mixing it into her orange juice. So on October 13, 2020, Norayati Jafar was eventually sentenced to 5 years and 4 months in prison. She pled guilty to one charge of voluntarily causing hurt with a heated substance and 3 drug-related charges. 3 other charges, which would include one for hot water poured on Faratika, were taken into consideration for sentencing. Now, by law, offenders convicted of causing hurt with heated substances can be jailed for up to 7 years and fined. Caning is also a possibility, though women in Singapore are exempt from corporal punishment. Now, the punishments didn't stop with Norayati, as her accomplices were also dealt with separately. Nur Hanifa Jamaat was sentenced in January 2019 to 1 year and 3 months in jail. She admitted to boiling the water and filming the attack. Akithiar was sentenced to 10 weeks imprisonment in 2020 for his role in the violence. Now, despite the brutal nature of that revenge, the court maintained that taking the law into one's own hands cannot be tolerated. However, details about the assault on Norayati's younger brother and whether Mr. Faisal or his relatives faced legal consequences for the attack were never disclosed in court records. August 2002. Aku Yadav was a feared Indian gangster who raped a girl and thought he'd get away with it like he always did. But the last time Yadav terrorized somebody, well, the women in the community rose up in retaliation. Bharat Kalikaran, widely known as Aku Yadav, terrorized the Kasturba Nagar slum in Nagpur, Maharashtra for over a decade. Born in 1971, Yadav grows up in a poor neighborhood, filled with crime, and was home to 2 rival gangs. So by the early 90s, Yadav had become one of the most feared figures, leading a gang responsible for serial rape, extortion, serial murder, and torture. Yadav's reign of terror would start in 1991 with a gang rape, marking the start of 13 years of unchecked violence. He and his associates targeted women and girls using rape as a weapon to intimidate and punish those who resisted his demands. He had tortured over 40 women and girls from 300 different families belonging to the community at the time. In fact, the residents would claim that a victim lived in every other house. But that's not all. Yadav would also extort their money, invade their homes, and murder at least 3 people. Despite numerous complaints, the police always turned a blind eye, as Yadav regularly bribed everybody with cash and alcohol. This would allow him to operate with confidence, exploiting the vulnerabilities of the predominantly Dalit community, who face systemic caste discrimination and neglect from authorities. In August 2004, Yadav rapes a girl and attempts to extort money from another victim when a 25-year-old woman named Usha Narayani reported his actions to the police. He retaliated by threatening to throw acid on her and then gang rape her. However, Narayani resisted, even threatening to blow herself up and her attackers, using her home's gas supply. It would be this defiance that would spark the rise against Yadav. Hundreds of residents, now armed with sticks and rocks, attack him and his gang, ultimately leading to his submission. So now, fearing for his life, Yadav surrendered to the police on August 7, 2004, seeking their protection. Following surrender, Yadav is charged and taken into custody. However, his detention would do little to ease the fears of Kasturba Nagar's residents, who believes that Yadav's history of bribing law enforcement would secure his release. In fact, on August 8, 2004, he narrowly survived an attack while being escorted to court. So by August 13, 2004, Yadav appears before the Nagpur District Court. His arrival is met with anger and anticipation, with nearly 200 women from the slum gathered to witness the proceedings. Yadav, confident of an acquittal, taunts his victims, calling one woman a That was a mistake. Now tensions escalated, and one of Yadav's victims removed her sandal and struck him, shouting that they couldn't live together. That triggered a spontaneous reaction amongst the women present. All of them here, either victims or parents to Yadav's victims, would now overpower the guards and officials and throw chili powder in Yadav's face, rendering him defenseless. It's almost like it was premeditated, because some of these women were armed with kitchen knives and other makeshift weapons, and with these, they attacked Yadav and stabbed this dude 70 times. But they didn't stop. They mutilated his body, cutting off his penis, and then killed him in a gruesome act of vengeance. Now, interestingly, none of these women attempted to flee after it was done, and collectively claimed responsibility for the killing. In fact, hundreds of residents, including those who weren't present at the courthouse, supported these women, and they too confessed to the murder. Now, initially, several women are arrested for this murder. However, public outcry and mounting support for these women's actions, including from a retired high court judge, led to their eventual acquittal. The judge stated that the women had been left with no alternative due to the police's consistent failure to protect them.
Man who plotted the murder of his ex-girlfriend and then killed her on a busy city sidewalk will be sentenced.
June 2017. Dale Williams is going to set a trap for his ex-girlfriend with the intention of killing her. Now, he doesn't know, but it turns out that the victim's children are going to teach this guy a lesson he'll never forget. 62-year-old Dale Williams had a history of turbulent relationships, including one with his former girlfriend, Elizabeth Pledger Stewart. Elizabeth, known as Tammy, was a mother, sister, aunt, and friend who extended her love to those in need. On June 15, 2017, Williams carefully planned an attack on Pledger Stewart. He waited over 45 minutes for her to get back from work. When she passed by in her car, Williams deliberately crashed into her vehicle on Market Street in Youngstown, Ohio. Elizabeth gets out of the car, and Williams goes on to shoot her multiple times in broad daylight until his gun was empty. Witnesses described the murder as ruthless, and it left the community in shock. Police arrived quickly and apprehend Williams at the scene. He later confesses to the killing, further traumatizing Elizabeth's family and friends. Following his arrest, though, Williams faces charges of aggravated murder. The trial reveals his premeditation and lack of remorse, as evidenced by his confession and the circumstances of the crime. On July 11, 2019, during the sentencing hearing, tensions reach a breaking point. Elizabeth's sister prepares to give her victim impact statement. The sons of the victim, 23-year-old Jerome Stewart and 30-year-old Anthony Dees, launch an attack on Dale Williams. Jerome leaps over the table and lunges at him, dragging him to the ground. Anthony doesn't skip a beat and joins the attack, throwing punches as officers struggle to intervene. The scene's chaotic. Deputies use a stun gun on Jerome. Family members cry, and not long after, the courtroom descends into chaos. Williams is injured during the assault and taken to the hospital for evaluation, and as a result, his sentencing was postponed. Jerome and Anthony were later arrested.
Anthony Dees and Jerome Stewart will now be in court on Monday. Right now, they're in the Mahoning County Jail facing assault and contempt of court charges.
They were given a month in jail for their actions. However, despite the charges, many people felt sorry for them and shared their anger at the man who killed their mother. July 15, 2019. The court reconvened under heavy security. This time, a dozen deputies are stationed in the courtroom to prevent further disruptions. Elizabeth's family expresses enduring heartbreak during this proceeding, with her aunt, Janet Dees, apologizing for the earlier outburst. Now, interestingly, when the judge asks Williams if he has any final statement, he chooses to remain silent. Shortly after, Judge Maureen Sweeney gives him 23 to life in prison for the murder of Elizabeth Pledger Stewart.